I was 21 years old when I first heard the number. 50,000. It was late September 1942 at Wendover Field, Utah. A dry place. Dust everywhere. The kind that worked its way into your boots, your mouth, your bedroll. We were training on B-17Fs then. 4 engines. Wright Cyclones. Heavy birds. They shook when you pushed the throttles forward. They always shook. Someone said it in the mess hall. They're gonna build 50,000 planes. Nobody laughed. We just looked at each other over tin plates and weak coffee. 50,000. I had grown up during the Depression. I had seen men fight over day work. I had seen farms go dry and shops close. Numbers like that didn't belong to our world. They belonged to newspapers, to speeches, to people who never had grease under their fingernails. I was a flight engineer and top turret gunner. My job was to keep the engines alive and watch the sky. Before that, I had worked in a garage in Kansas City. Fixed trucks, fixed tractors, fixed anything with a carburetor. In January 1942, after Pearl Harbor, I enlisted in the Army Air Forces. Like everyone else, I didn't want to be a hero. I wanted a paycheck and 3 meals. They sent me to Keesler Field first, then to Salt Lake, then to Wendover. We trained over salt flats and empty desert. Bombing practice, formation flying, emergency drills, over and over. The B-17 was new to most of us. It smelled of oil and hot metal, hydraulic fluid, sweat soaked into canvas seats. The interphone crackled. The oxygen masks tasted like rubber and old breath. We learned every rivet, every cable, every warning light. At night, in the barracks, we talked about home, and about rumors, about England, about Germany, about what the Luftwaffe was doing in Russia, about how many planes we had. Not enough, everyone said. Never enough. In October, a captain showed us a newspaper clipping. It was from Berlin, he said. Reichsmarschall Hermann Göring had spoken to Luftwaffe officers earlier that year. He had mocked American production claims. Said it was propaganda. Said the Americans were lying. Said they could never build tens of thousands of aircraft. He laughed. That's what the paper said. Laughed. We passed it around. Somebody said, "Good. Let him laugh." Someone else said, "We'll see who's laughing later." I didn't say anything. I was still trying to remember which gauge read manifold pressure and which one read RPM. In November, we finished transition training. Our crew was finalized. Pilot, First Lieutenant Robert Bob Harris. Texas, quiet, steady hands. Co-pilot, Lieutenant Paul Kramer. Brooklyn, talked too much. Navigator, Lieutenant William Reed. Iowa, always reading maps. Bombardier, Lieutenant Frank DeLuca. New Jersey, Catholic, carried a little Bible. Radio operator, Sergeant Tom Evans. Ohio, waist gunners, Corporal Eddie Martinez and Private Jack Collins. Tail gunner, Sergeant Leonard Price. Me, Staff Sergeant Daniel Cooper. 9 men. 1 airplane. By December, we were flying long-range navigation exercises. 8 hours. 10 hours. Fuel management. Lean mixture. Emergency drills at altitude. Frost forming inside the fuselage. Minus 40 degrees up there. Your gloves stiffened. Your eyelashes froze. Your breath crystallized on the mask. The instructor said, "Get used to it." In January 1943, orders came. Overseas. European theater. We went by train to New York. Then by ship. The Queen Mary. Converted troopship. Blacked out. No lights at night. Zigzagging through the Atlantic. U-boats were out there. We knew. We didn't talk about it. We slept in stacked bunks, 5 high. Hot. No air. Men vomiting. Men coughing. Seasick. Homesick. It took 6 days. When we docked in Scotland, it was raining. It was always raining. We were sent to RAF Basingbourne, Cambridgeshire. Station 121. Part of the 91st Bomb Group. 8th Air Force. The mighty 8th. That's what they called it later. At the time, it didn't feel mighty. It felt muddy. Cold. Temporary. Nissen huts. Coal stoves. Wet boots. Wet uniforms. Wet blankets. The airfield was steel matting and concrete, surrounded by fields and hedgerows. British farmers watched us from a distance. Polite, quiet, curious. Our planes arrived in February. New B-17Fs, fresh from Boeing and Douglas factories. Shiny aluminum. No camouflage. They called them flying fortresses. They didn't look like fortresses to me. They looked fragile. Thin skin. Exposed engines. A lot of glass. We painted our nose art in March. Hard luck lady. A red-haired woman in a torn dress. Somebody said it was bad luck to name a plane hard luck. Bob shrugged. Better to expect it, he said. We started flying combat missions in April 1943. The first one was to Bremen. April 17th. Focke-Wulf factory. Deep in Germany. We were scared. Nobody said it. But you could see it. Men checking parachutes twice. Men touching lucky coins. Men writing letters in the morning. Just in case. We took off before dawn. One by one. Engines roaring. Prop wash flattening the grass. Climbing slowly. Joining formation. Hundreds of bombers assembling in the gray sky. Contrails forming. White scars across blue. I watched the gauges. Oil pressure. Cylinder head temperature. Fuel flow. Everything in the green. Crossed the Dutch coast. Flak started. Black bursts. Puffs. Sharp-edged. Like dirty flowers. They rocked the plane. You felt it in your stomach. In your teeth. Fighters came after that. Messerschmitt Bf-109s. Focke-Wulf 190s. Fast. Dark. They slashed through formation. 20mm cannons. Tracer rounds. Red and green lines crossing in space. I fired from the top turret. Short bursts. You didn't aim at planes. You aimed at shapes. At movement. At shadows. We lost 16 bombers that day. 16. Over Bremen. Some burned. Some went down spiraling. Some just disappeared into cloud. When we landed, the field was quiet. Ground crews counted holes. Mechanics shook their heads. We drank weak beer in the mess. Nobody celebrated. In May, missions increased. Wilhelmshaven, Kiel, Emden, Ruhr Valley, Regensburg. We flew twice a week. Sometimes 3 times. Fatigue built up. Hands trembling. Stomach ulcers. Nightmares. Men talking in their sleep. Replacement crews arrived. Young. Green. Too clean. We called them virgins. We stopped calling them that after a while. By summer 1943, something changed. The sky filled up. Not with fighters. With our own planes. More groups. More wings. More bases. B-17s. B-24 Liberators. Hundreds. Then thousands. On July 25, 1943, we flew to Hamburg. Operation Gomorrah. RAF had gone in at night. We went in daylight. Firestorms. Smoke rising 20,000 feet. The city looked like it was boiling. I saw entire blocks burning. No roofs. No streets. Just flame. We dropped our bombs through smoke. Couldn't see anything. Flak was lighter. But the fighters were there. Always. We lost friends over Hamburg. Over Schweinfurt. Over Regensburg again. August 17, 1943. Double strike. Ball bearing factories. We were part of the Regensburg force. We were supposed to land in North Africa afterward. Long mission. Over 11 hours. Deep penetration. No fighter escort past Belgium. We knew what that meant. They came in waves. Head-on attacks. Cannons firing. Windshields shattering. Nose compartments exploding. Blood freezing on metal. Frank DeLuca was hit. Fragment in his shoulder. He kept bombing. Didn't say a word. We landed in Benghazi that night. Worn out. Half-deaf. Shaking. Hard luck lady had 137 holes. But she flew. That fall, rumors spread again. About production. About factories in Detroit. Willow Run. Seattle. Long Beach. Plants running day and night. Women on assembly lines. Teenagers riveting wings. Men working 12-hour shifts. They said America was building planes faster than Germany could shoot them down. We didn't really believe it. Not yet. In October, we got new escorts. P-47 Thunderbolts. Big. Heavy. Not much range. They turned back early. Then came the P-38 Lightnings. Twin boom fighters. Longer legs. Still not enough. We were still alone over Germany. In November, I saw something that made me think. We were taking off for Munster. Another deep raid. I stood near the runway waiting for our turn. And they kept coming. B-17 after B-17. B-24 after B-24. Endless. Engines roaring. Propellers flashing. One every 30 seconds. For hours. I lost count after 200. A ground crewman next to me muttered, "Jesus Christ." I thought about that newspaper clipping. About Göring laughing. I wondered if he was still laughing. But at that moment, standing in the cold English mud, watching wave after wave of bombers climb into cloud, I didn't feel powerful. I felt small. I felt tired. And I felt like this war was only beginning to show its real size. And we were trapped inside it. By December 1943, winter had settled over eastern England. Not the kind of winter we knew back home. Not clean snow and bright mornings. This was mud and mist and endless gray. The airfield never really dried. Steel matting was slick with ice. Puddles froze at night and turned back to sludge by noon. Our boots were always damp. Our socks never quite dried. We flew anyway. December 11, 1943. Mission to Bremen again. The Focke-Wulf plant. Same target. Different season. Briefing room smelled of cigarette smoke and wet wool. A large map covered the front wall. Red yarn traced our route. Black circles marked flak belts. Colonel stood in front. Primary target, Bremen. Secondary, Wilhelmshaven. No speeches. No inspiration. Just facts. We studied the route. North Sea. Dutch coast. Flak corridor near Oldenburg. Fighter concentration over Bremen. Same places. Same dangers. Someone whispered, "Lucky city." Nobody answered. We took off in darkness. Engines coughing. then catching. One by one into the fog. Climbed on instruments. No horizon. Just needles and voices in the headset. 2,000, 5,000, 10,000. Formation assembly took over an hour. Planes sliding into position like tired birds. At 25,000 feet, the cold came back. -50. Oxygen masks on. Gloves stiff. Turret grease thick as wax. I kept watching the engines. Cylinder temps dropping. Carb heat. Mixture lean. Everything balanced on thin margins. Over the coast, flak began. Predictable. Accurate. They knew our routes now. Black bursts walked across the sky. Closer. Closer. One hit our number 3 engine cowling. Metal rattled. Oil sprayed across the wing. Pressure dropping. Number 3 losing oil, I called. Bob answered calmly. Feather it if it drops. We stayed in formation. Couldn't drop out yet. Too dangerous alone. Fighters appeared near Bremen. 109s and 190s. They came head on, firing through the nose. Glass exploded. Plexiglass shards flew like knives. Navigator reed was cut across the cheek. Blood floated in the thin air. Tiny red beads. We held position. Bomb bay doors opened. Cold rushed in, like standing in a hurricane. Frank lay flat in the nose. Face pressed to the sight. Bombs away, he said. The plane lifted slightly. We turned west. That was when number 3 died. Oil pressure hit 0. Prop windmilled. Vibration shook the wing. I feathered it. The prop froze. Drag increased. We fell behind. Formation pulled away. One by one. Like ships disappearing into fog. Then we were alone. Bob didn't say anything. Neither did Paul. We all knew. Lone bombers were targets. The fighters came back. 3 Focke-Wulfs from 6 o'clock high. Leonard in the tail fired first. Long burst. I rotated the turret. Tracked the nearest one. Fired. Tracers curved. One fighter passed underneath us. So close I saw the pilot's goggles. Then he was gone. Another came from below. Hit the radio room. Tom Evans screamed. Then nothing. Smoke filled the fuselage. Electrical fire. I grabbed the extinguisher. Sprayed blindly. White foam everywhere. The smell was bitter. Chemical. The fire died. Tom was slumped. Shrapnel in his chest. He was breathing. Barely. Frank crawled back. Wrapped him in a blanket. Morphine. We limped home on 3 engines. Altitude falling. Speed dropping. Crossed the coast at 8,000 feet. Flak followed us. Even there. Even then. We landed at Basingbourn just before dark. Runway lights dim. Ambulance waiting. They took Tom away. He died that night. We lost 3 planes from our squadron. Again. In January 1944, things began to change. Slowly. Almost quietly. New fighters arrived. P-51 Mustangs. Long nose. Merlin engines. British design. American production. They could go all the way. To Berlin. And back. At first, we didn't trust it. Too good to be true. But then we saw them. Silver shapes weaving above us. Staying. Not turning back. Fighting the fighters. For us. January 11th, 1944. Mission to Oschersleben. Aircraft factory. Deep inside Germany. First major Mustang escorted raid. We felt it immediately. Luftwaffe attacks were different. Less organized. Broken up. Mustangs chased them, cut them down. We still lost planes, but fewer. Every loss mattered, but fewer. In February, we hit Leipzig, Brunswick, Frankfurt, Augsburg. The tempo increased. 3, 4 missions a week. No rest. No recovery. We slept in our clothes. Ate when we could. Wrote letters we never sent. By March, big week came. Operation Argument. February 20 to 25, 1944. All-out assault on German aircraft industry. Regensburg, Augsburg, Schweinfurt, Gotha. We flew twice in 3 days. My hands shook when I poured coffee. Factories burned. Hangars collapsed. Runways cratered. We saw wrecked Messerschmitts on airfields. Scattered like toys. Prisoners later said production fell. We didn't know that then. We only knew we were exhausted. And still flying. Replacement planes kept arriving. Brand new. Smelling of paint and rubber. Crews too. Fresh faces. Nervous smiles. Someone said, "Where do they get them?" Someone else answered, "Back home." We heard numbers. 60,000 planes in 1943. More in 1944. B-17s rolling off lines every hour. Liberators even faster. Fighters everywhere. Willow Run. Boeing. Douglas. Lockheed. North American. Names we learned like prayer. In April, we started flying to Berlin regularly. The Big B. Flak was thick as rain. Fighters still dangerous. But they were fewer. Fuel shortages. Pilot shortages. Prisoners said Göring was furious. Said his pilots were being sacrificed. We didn't feel sorry. We couldn't afford to. April 29, 1944. Berlin raid. Clouds at 20,000. Bombed by radar. H-2X. Mickey. We couldn't see the city. But flak found us anyway. A shell burst under our belly. Fragments tore through the bomb bay. Missed the tanks by inches. After landing, a crew chief held up a jagged piece of steel. Said, "That was looking for you." By May, preparations for something big were obvious. More transports. More paratroopers. More briefings. More secrecy. We weren't told. But we knew. Something was coming. And the skies were filling up. Every day. More planes. More fuel trucks. More mechanics. More noise. I remembered Göring laughing. And wondered if he still had the breath. Because from where I sat, freezing in a vibrating aluminum tube over Germany, it looked like America was building the sky itself. And throwing it at Europe. And it wasn't finished yet. By June 1944, none of us were counting missions anymore. We were counting mornings. How many times we woke up and were still alive. How many times the orderly room door opened and our name wasn't called. How many empty bunks appeared overnight. Hard Luck Lady had flown 37 missions. Most planes didn't make it past 25. That was the rule. But rules changed. Losses were heavy. Replacements were slow. So tours became 30. Then 35. Then, until further notice. We stopped asking. June 5, 1944, the night before D-Day, the base didn't sleep. C-47s lined the runways. Paratroopers sat on the grass, smoking quietly. Faces blackened. Gear stacked. They looked younger than us. Some were barely 20. We watched from the edge of the field. Nobody joked. Engines started just before midnight. One after another. Tow planes. Gliders. Transport after transport. Heading south. Toward France. We knew. Everyone knew. In the early hours of June 6th, we were briefed. Our mission wasn't to bomb cities. It was to hit coastal batteries and rail yards. Support. Cover. We flew over the channel at dawn. The sea below was full. Ships. Thousands. Landing craft. Destroyers. Battleships. Wake trails crossing like spiderwebs. I had never seen anything like it. Still haven't. Normandy coast appeared through haze. Smoke already rising. Naval guns firing. Great flashes. White splashes inland. Flak was lighter than Germany. But it was there. We bombed near Caen. Rail junction. Then turned back. Spitfires and Mustangs swarmed everywhere. Allied aircraft filled the sky. No room. No silence. Only engines. When we landed, news spread fast. The landings were successful. Beachheads held. We didn't cheer. We were too tired. We flew again the next day. And the next. Bridges. Roads. Troop columns. Marshalling yards. France burned that summer. July 1944. Operation Cobra. Breakout from Normandy. We bombed near St. Lo. Carpet bombing. Miles of explosives. Some fell short. Hit American troops. We heard later. Nobody talked about it. But we thought about it. At night. In August, Paris was liberated. We didn't see it. We were over Germany. Merseburg. Leuna fuel plants. Synthetic oil. That became the priority. Hitler needed fuel. So did his planes. So did his tanks. We went after it. Over and over. Leuna. Politz. Bolin. Brux. Flak around oil targets was the worst. Dense. Layered. Radar directed. You flew into walls of steel. September 11, 1944. Merseburg. Leuna again. We were at 26,000. Bomb bay open. Flak burst right in front. A direct hit. The shock threw me against the turret ring. Number 2 engine caught fire. Flames streamed backward. Fuel line ruptured. Bob tried to dive. Extinguish. Didn't work. Fire spread to the wing. Bail out, he said. No shouting. Just flat. We put on chutes. I crawled to the waist door. Smoke everywhere. Eyes burning. Eddie Martinez was already there. Crossed himself. Then jumped. I followed. The air ripped me apart. Violent. Spinning. Then the chute opened. Silence. Almost. Wind and distant explosions. Hard Luck Lady went down minutes later. Exploded in the clouds. I watched it. 5 parachutes. Only 5. 9 men. 5 chutes. We landed near Zeitz. Saxony. Farm fields. I hit hard. Sprained ankle. German soldiers arrived within minutes. Volkstrom and Luftwaffe ground crew. Rifles. Shouting. Hands up. I obeyed. They took my watch. My boots. My jacket. Loaded me onto a truck. With the others. We didn't speak. We were taken to Dulag Luft, near Frankfurt. Interrogation camp. They were polite. Coffee. Cigarettes. Questions. We gave name, rank, serial number. Nothing else. After that, Stalag Luft I. Barth. Near the Baltic. Barbed wire. Guard towers. Wooden barracks. Sand everywhere. Hunger. Cold. Boredom. We followed the war through rumors. Through Red Cross parcels. Through new prisoners. They said American production was unstoppable. They said German cities were rubble. They said Göring had lost influence, that Hitler blamed the Luftwaffe, that pilots were flying on fumes. We saw German guards getting thinner, older, younger, less confident. Allied bombers passed overhead daily. Hundreds, thousands. We watched them from behind wire. Silver streams, contrails, eastward, always eastward. They were still going. Winter 1944-45 was brutal. No heat, little food, typhus nearby. Men died quietly. We buried them in frozen ground. In January, we heard about the Ardennes. Bulge. Last German offensive. Then silence. Then retreat. March 1945. Bombers flew so low we could see markings. Squadron codes. Stars. We waved. They couldn't see us. Or maybe they did. On April 30th, 1945, a guard told us Hitler was dead. No ceremony. No announcement. Just a sentence. Like weather. May 1st, the guards left. Just walked away. May 2nd, British troops arrived. Thin. Tired. Smiling. We were free. I weighed 112 pounds. I had gray in my hair. I was 23. And the war was still going on somewhere. In the Pacific. Planes were still being built. Every hour. Every day. I thought again of that laughter. Of Göring. Of the numbers. Of the factories. Of the women riveting wings in Michigan. Of men working night shifts in California. They had never seen flak. Never heard cannon fire. Never smelled burning oil at 25,000 feet. But they were there with us. In every bolt. Every panel. Every engine. They were part of it. And it wasn't over yet. When the British took us out of Stalag Luft I in early May 1945, I thought I would feel something big. Relief. Joy. Anger. Something. Instead, I felt empty. They loaded us onto trucks and drove us west. Past villages that looked half abandoned. Past burned-out tanks. Past bridges repaired with wooden planks. Past fields full of shell craters filled with rainwater. Germany looked tired. Like us. We were taken to a processing camp near Brussels first. Then flown to Le Havre. Then put on a transport ship back across the Atlantic. This time, the ocean didn't scare me. Nothing did. Not anymore. I slept most of the way. When we arrived in New York in June 1945, a band was playing on the dock. Brass instruments. Flags. Women waving. Reporters. Cameras. They called us heroes. I didn't know what to do with that word. I hadn't felt heroic when I was bailing out of a burning airplane. I hadn't felt heroic when Tom Evans died on the floor. I hadn't felt heroic when Hard Luck Lady exploded in front of me. I felt small then. And I still did. They sent me to a hospital in Pennsylvania. Rehabilitation. Malnutrition. Nerve damage in my left hand. Hearing loss. Night tremors. Doctors wrote things on clipboards. Asked questions. I answered. Sometimes. Sometimes I just stared at the wall. In July, Germany surrendered officially. VE Day had already happened while I was still in Europe, waiting for transport. We celebrated with watered-down beer and Red Cross cookies. No shouting. No singing. Just quiet. In August, Hiroshima. Then Nagasaki. Then Japan surrendered. VJ Day. The war was over. All of it. 6 years. Millions dead. 2 oceans crossed by bombs and steel. And suddenly, it stopped. I was discharged in October 1945. Honorable discharge. Army Air Forces. Staff Sergeant, European African Middle Eastern Campaign Medal with 5 bronze stars. I put it in a drawer. Didn't look at it for years. I went back to Kansas City. The garage was still there. Same owner. Same smell of oil and rubber. He hired me back. No questions. I worked on trucks again. On Buicks. On farm equipment. On anything that came in. Sometimes, when I leaned over an engine, the smell of hot oil would take me back. To 25,000 feet. To frost on metal. To tracers climbing toward us. My hands would shake. I learned to hide it. At night, I listened to the radio. News programs. Commentators. They talked about production numbers. About how America had built nearly 300,000 aircraft during the war. Fighters. Bombers. Transports. Trainers. More than Germany, Japan, and Italy combined. They talked about Willow Run building a B-24 every hour. About Boeing rolling out B-17s like automobiles. About shipyards and steel mills and assembly lines. They talked about how Hermann Göring had once laughed at the idea. Said America was bluffing. Said it was impossible. I never heard him laugh. I only saw the results. I saw them in silver formations over Berlin. In endless takeoffs from muddy English fields. In new planes replacing the ones that burned. In Mustangs that stayed with us all the way. In bombers that kept coming after we were shot down. After we were captured. After we were gone. People sometimes ask me now, years later, what won the war. They expect a simple answer. Bravery. Leadership. Strategy. Faith. I don't give them that. I tell them about factories. About women working night shifts with hair wrapped in scarves. About men sleeping in locker rooms to save time. About riveters with swollen hands. About mechanics who never saw combat. About farmers who paid more for gasoline so we could have fuel. About boys who never made it home. It wasn't glorious. It was exhausting. It was ugly. It was relentless. Göring laughed once, they say. Maybe he did. Maybe he thought numbers didn't matter. That skill and courage were enough. Up there, in the cold, with flak tearing holes in the wings, I learned something else. Courage runs out. Luck runs out. Bodies break. What didn't run out was production. Engines. Aluminum. Fuel. Pilots. Replacements. Again. And again. And again. That's what I remember. Not victory parades. Not speeches. Not flags. I remember the sound of engines starting before dawn. The smell of exhaust in wet air. The weight of flak jackets. The way the runway lights blurred when you were too tired to focus. I remember counting parachutes. I remember empty bunks. I remember names scratched into mess hall tables. And I remember looking up from behind barbed wire in 1945, watching wave after wave of American bombers heading east, knowing the war was already decided. Not by one battle. Not by one general. Not by one brave act. But by a country that turned itself into a factory. And kept building. Long after laughter stopped.